Yeah, sorry. So we're one of the larger audio conferencing vendors out there, particularly focused on enterprise. And we look at environments whereby you can embed voice communications in any kind of workflow that you might need for business. And so WebRTC plays a key role. One of the one piece of focus that we've really been evaluating is working with the mobile browsers. And as you heard Kris talk about earlier, is that iOS Safari is not quite there yet, and as we saw. But it was released in September of 2017. It does work really well for audio, but as you could see, video remains a little bit suspect. So these slides were pretty apropos to what's been going on with Safari. But they've had 9 releases, and they keep updating it, and we want to take advantage of that. Chrome, however, is another story. It has been working in conjunction with Android devices for many, many years. Since 2014, it works on Lollipop all the way through Oreo, which is just now coming out. That correlates to about 72% of all Android devices that are out there. But basically, it started getting really stable on Android in about Chrome version 40, and current release is 64. So there is a lot of mileage behind Chrome in Android in terms of what we can utilize and what we can implement. And for us, we see a lot of user benefits specifically for using the mobile browsers. If you are in an audio conference and you attend these every day, no more need for a pin. Just get a URL, pull it up on your mobile device, and bang, you're right into the conference. That gives you instant conference access, and you do not need to download a particular application and install it. In large enterprise environments, that is really problematic because they lock down your mobile device, particularly if it's been company issued. And so anyway, adding new apps, and particularly guests, when you're presenting to someone else, you have no idea what their environment entails. And allowing them to get in via a mobile browser makes it really convenient. Let's see, from a developer side, from our perspective, if we can implement this in JavaScript, that's a huge plus. We might not necessarily do it inside of a web view, and Chad talked about that specific use case within iOS Safari, is that you can't gain access to the microphone and camera inside a web view when you're using Safari for iOS. Let's see, we actually, for us, if we can do it just in JavaScript and just inside the browser and have that self-contained, that's okay too. But now we don't have multiple code bases. We don't have to deploy to Objective-C and Java-based apps. We get a faster launch time, and we don't have to worry about all the headaches affiliated with the App Store. So it looks really promising, as in something that is germane to our business, makes users have easier access and can get in. But there are a lot of particular nuances when it comes to mobile WebRTC. And Chad Chad Hart spoke briefly about some of the introductions, but look at the differences that we see. When you're mobile, you really need to understand how to handle calls, as in I'm on an audio conference or I'm on a call, and then another one comes in. How does that get handled? And it is different in mobile. Obviously, that's not necessarily coming in on your desktop device. You are likely connected to a Bluetooth. You could be in your car. You could be at the office. You could have a headset in. If you're using a browser, does it connect to Bluetooth specifically? And a lot of users on their mobile devices obviously use a Bluetooth headset. And when you get backgrounded, as in the screen goes dark, you've pressed power, you've walked away for too long, how is that behavior on a mobile device? And how does it differ from an app-based deployment of WebRTC? Alerts and notifications, as well as speaker and headset implementations, all are nuanced for the devices and the particular platform that they go with. So for example, let's really look at an app-based solution. So this is our mobile app on your right. And when the app gets background and you come out, your screen is now locked. On the left is when you use CallKit on iOS. So it has true presence and capabilities as if it is affiliated with a call on the device natively. But with iOS Safari, if I come out of having a lock screen, I'm now faced with this screen, and it looks like as if you have been streaming. And that could be confusing for the user, right? How many pause their audio conference while they're talking to someone? Not that they wouldn't want to pause someone who's speaking while they're talking, but that's totally different. It is a nuance. It is specific to mobile that we see this type of thing, and specific to iOS and Safari. Chrome handles it differently. Secondarily, if I have an incoming call while I'm in an app, on my right is the screen I would see for the incoming call while I'm in a WebRTC application that's running native on iOS. I can actually go and end the existing call. I can send that call to voicemail, or I can hold and accept. But if I am just running iOS Safari, I don't have any of those options. So very different user behavior when running iOS Safari when you're actually inside of a WebRTC session and you receive another call. Another interesting thing Alex and I found out in our sample applications that we did to test this is the choice of the speaker when you go and engage with a mobile browser. So on Android, specifically, we saw that the speakerphone, the built-in speaker, was the one that resonated, as in you will hear loudly when you get into the conference, it's going to come up through that. But on iOS and Safari, you'll actually hear it in the speaker headset within the phone itself, as in you need to put it up to your ear in order to hear the conference. That gives you two different, very different scenarios. One, on the Android side, you go and blast that speaker, everybody's going to hear what's going on in the conference and potentially you getting reamed out by your boss. Okay? If you have on the iOS side, it's going to be quiet. But you may have forgotten, you may not know that the conference is going on because you didn't put it up to your headset. On the Android side, it's really loud. And that's going to give you feedback. So you might have to design your application around that such that you are muted when you join the call. Anyway, these are specific nuances that are between the two platforms that we are really looking at. So key takeaways. As you saw from Chris Allen's presentation, there's so many Chris's tonight that you can't keep track of them, neither can I. Let's see. On the iOS Safari side, there's a lot more advances yet to come. It is relatively new. It just was launched last September. Wait, be patient. We'll see improvements within the Apple community in terms of what is being adopted inside that browser. We do hope for things like controlling the output audio device, which microphone, which camera, all those kind of things, and those controls being readily accessible inside that environment. Let's see, on other things, be very cognizant and design around those shortcomings. There are specific use cases that you can find where the mobile browser might be appropriate, and we see some of those in our deployments and specific customer use cases where we might be able to use the mobile browser, but be careful of all these individual cases. Let's see, and be specific. Really evaluate your application, deploy it in example apps, understand the differences between iOS Safari and Android Chrome and how it works across all those different applications. And anyway, find very narrow use cases when you're implementing anything inside a mobile browser. Just some tips. I thought it'd be nice and quick. I know Chad wanted to finish up at 8:45. But any quick questions about iOS Safari and Android Chrome? Yes.
Samson, let me give you a microphone.
On iOS Safari, presumably every release of iOS, there's changes. Are we running into issues where we need to know the version of iOS that we're running on because we get different behaviors or different bugs in each in each iteration?
You do. There's differences between iOS 11, 11.1, and 11.2. We've seen just specific bug fixes that have improved video. Yeah, it is major. And for those of you who do deploy WebRTC applications, having a test matrix against all these different clients and all the different browsers is really important. And there are some frameworks, Chad can probably mention a few, that actually do regression testing using Selenium on those different devices. Mobile's a bit of a different animal, right? Because you can't necessarily use those frameworks to test those. So a lot of that we have to actually do manually here at Clique. That's important. I've now been at 2 companies focused on WebRTC, and we have to do very specific testing about what's coming out in alpha or nightly, what's coming out in beta, and what's GA'd in terms of all those different browsers. And we run regression tests every night in conjunction with those, and that's really important if you want a viable production-grade application that's running on WebRTC.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions?
Yep, Chad, right here.
Just to build on that question, I guess how do you test that? Is that just all manual right now, human-based testing, or Appium, or is there tooling that helps with that?
On the mobile side, it tends to be manual. Again, I think you could use a bunch of different test frameworks for Android Chrome, but we haven't gotten that far in terms of our testing. But for Firefox, for Edge, for Chrome, you can use Selenium-based test frameworks that build clients that actually do testing and do automated regression against your service for those 3 browsers and those 3 and various versions of those browsers. Absolutely. Chad, there was one that was just released like a few.
You're referring to Kite?
Yes.
It's so that was actually a project that was Google funded, focused to actually not only test individual browsers but test interop across browsers. Right. So being able to call from Edge to Safari, for example.
So I think that was on WebRTC Hacks, and it's Kite. K-I-T.
I don't have a WebRTC Hacks yet,
All
although
right.
I'm going to try to get an
Right.
article on that. But
shortly.
if you message me, I will happily send a link to it. Or if you just search for WebRTC KITE, you'll find a link to it. There's a mention of it on the WebRTC, Discuss WebRTC official message board too.
Cool. And just like final add-on to that would be, are the emulators really keeping up with this rapid change? Like, do you generally have to work with an actual device when you're working on these mobile apps, or can the emulators?
So in those cases, you're using a container that is the actual client, right? You're basically running an OS and connecting from a server or multiple instances of that client in order to connect it. And yeah, you're deploying different versions of the browser in order to do those connections. Let's see, I'm trying to think, Test RTC, that you can choose different versions of Chrome, but it doesn't quite go that far. It doesn't have Firefox or Edge in those particular cases. I think those are coming down the pike. Yeah, it's like having 50 different laptops with 50 different versions, and they're all connecting. But
You are
it's
old school.
necessary. Yeah, but it is necessary. And if you're looking at nightly, you'll get some idea of where things are changing and where you'll break a regression. And then beta will be a little more close to home. And then obviously GA, you'll run a fire drill if you see that. And I wish I could say that you get this predictability between nightly beta, that they're but no, there are bugs absolutely introduced between beta and GA the public release of a specific browser that we've all had to deal with in this particular industry. And we scramble, right, Alex? Firefox is a good example.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, guys.
Really useful information.